today's video, I'm going to actually walk you through a new planting right next to me. This is a Cara Cara navel orange that I just picked up at Summerwinds Nursery. Before we get to planting it, we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of rootstock when you go out to pick your citrus tree. I'll also walk you through how I prep the plant before it actually goes into the planting hole. We'll talk about what I do to the soil to improve drainage so that this plant can do better than just planting it in straight clay soil. I'll also talk to you about what I do after planting. So one of the first things I planted in my yard, well before I knew anything about gardening, was inexperienced, was I bought an orange tree from my local Walmart. The problem with buying from big box stores in general is that most of those trees are coming from California, and they're grown on rootstocks that are not suitable for Arizona. So most of your citrus that you would buy from one of those big box stores is typically going to be on C35 rootstock. You also need to be careful even going to a nursery like Summerwinds, because they stock also trees that come from California. There's another company called Four Winds Grower that's in California, and they also use C35 rootstock. I would stay away from C35. So this tree here, coming from Sunset Nursery, is on sour orange rootstock. That is the rootstock that all of your citrus orchards use. So definitely look for that when you're buying your tree, because that's going to give you the longevity and ensure that this tree can actually grow well in clay soils. Will a inappropriate rootstock survive? Sure, it'll survive. My orange tree lived for 10 years, gave me lots of fruit, but eventually started declining the last 2 years. And I just recently dug it out, so I needed a replacement. So this time around, 10 years later, I'm selecting a tree that I know is going to do well in our soils. This was literally the last tree they had of the Cara Cara variety. It's in a 5-gallon size, so I didn't really have any choice here. I would have preferred to get a 15-gallon, just because with orange trees, they're a little slower to grow than some of your other fruit trees, so it's nice to get something a little bigger so that it can bear fruit for you within a year. This one, it's probably going to take a few years for me to get a good crop of fruit off of it. You know, it's fairly thin, it's just newly grafted, so it can't hold the weight of the fruit even if it could fruit. So I find 15 gallon to be the ideal size if you can. Very rarely will you find, when you get a container plant from a nursery, that they're growing it in good soil mix, you know, inorganic soil mix with just mulch on top. Nurseries really tend to use compost in their mix and wood chips, actually, large wood chips in the media that they pack the tree in. As we've talked about in other videos, that's not ideal for the long-term health of this tree, because those organic materials are going to break down. They're going to create soil voids, you know, as they degrade. They're going to create heat in the soil. They're going to rob nutrients from your tree as they break down, and they're going to cause rot in your soil. We don't want any of those conditions, so what I will be doing with this tree is taking this out of the container, slipping the root ball into a larger bucket, and submerging that in water so I can wash up all this junk to get the roots cleaned off. And then we'll be putting this into clean soil, real soil, you know, made out of clay, sand, silt. Help me rinse off this plant. I just found an ice bucket that I happen to have that has a wide enough diameter so I can get this root ball in and out very easily. So we're just going to place this in here. So, you know, I found this rock in here as well. I found some plastic in here. I'm not going to be able to get everything out, but I mean, you look at these pretty egregious pieces. At least we can get those out of there. So I'm just essentially feeling for large chunks of wood in here and pulling them out. Having to sit in water just makes things softer, so you can easily get to these pieces and slide them out. It's really no wonder why you see people struggle with some of these plants the first few years, imagining that this stuff is just growing in these large chunks of bark. It appears this grower put it almost exclusively in wood chips. I found rocks in there as well as some weed fabric wrapped around the root ball. Okay, I got most of those chips out of the root ball. There's still a little bit I need to work on, so I'm going to go ahead and finish that up. So while I go to prepare the hole, I don't want this root ball to dry out. You see that it doesn't have any media on it, so I'm going to remove it from that kind of cleaning container and stick it into this 5-gallon bucket that I'm filling with water here. For this planting, I am not going to just plant it in straight clay soil. Will it survive in straight clay soil? Sure, it will. But drainage is a problem in my yard. You may not have that issue. There are different soil compositions. You know, in the valley, some people have more sand than others. The problem with clay soil is that it does not allow the roots to breathe very well down there. That's why when you go to dig your plants out, mature plants, you will find that they do not go into the soil deep here. They stay within the first foot or so of soil because of the lack of oxygen down deep. This is going to help the roots go down a little deeper by providing some oxygen relief down there with some air pockets. This all-purpose sand is going to help with my drainage. You should always do a drainage test, you know, whatever planting hole before you actually go to plant. Fill that completely with water, and if it drains within 24 hours, then you're okay to plant. If it doesn't, then do not plant and work at that drainage. You know, drop some gypsum at the bottom of that hole and then keep applying water daily until you achieve drainage within 24 hours. Despite that I do have that drainage within a day, I still would like it to drain a little faster, so I'm going to put some sand in to help with that. Alright, so I've already dug my hole, spared you that. Basically, you know, a pickaxe and a trenching shovel are probably the best tools for the job. Really helps break up the soil and cut through that clay well. What you also didn't see is I mixed in 2 bags of sand with a cultivator, so really mix that up well. What I'm going to add in at this point is some pumice. You can see the hole is far bigger than what I need for this plant. I was actually expecting to find a 15-gallon and I did not. We'll definitely have to bring the soil level up for this plant because we actually ideally want this plant sitting a few inches above grade because it will sink over time. So I'm going to just layer it like that. I'm going to pour some pumice in and then mix it up with my soil here. We're just trying to get an even mixture here. Alright, so as I position this plant on the soil, I can see that it's definitely a few inches above grade, which is good. We're going to kind of taper the soil off. The other thing I want to do is point the graft away from the sun. So I've directed it towards the north side because the sun is hitting it from the south here. As you can see, we're just mounding up the soil. So this tree is actually slightly sitting on a mound, which is what we want. So the mound here that this plant is sitting on is a couple feet across, and then we have a lower point all around it. So what's going to happen is when we water that root ball, it's going to saturate the root zone, but then the excess water will run off to the sides and wet that soil and encourage the roots to start moving out laterally to stabilize the plant and also to increase that feeder root zone, those hairy roots. Here's our bag of composted mulch that I'll be applying around the root ball here and the sides. Alright, so I will be removing that center stake and double staking the tree I use Blue Hawk rebar pins here. These will stand the test of time. You want a mini sledgehammer to drive it in. Because this is a young tree, I'm also going to trunk wrap the tree. You could use a whitewash, but this has no foliage on the bottom to help protect the trunk. In time, I want to encourage that, but for now, I'm going to just go ahead and wrap this. This will prevent the bark from burning and protect that graft union as well from burning. Just use some garden tape to secure this. Alright, our tree is fairly top heavy, so I'm going to actually add some pipes over the top of these stakes just to give us a little bit more height. And then as far as securing the plant to the posts, you can use garden tape initially, since there isn't going to be much weight or resistance with how thin this trunk is. As it thickens up, probably going to want to go with some garden wire. Alright, so our tree is mulched, it's staked. We definitely want to get some water on this plant. I'm prepping for the tree to be planted. I already did deep soak the soil, so I'm not really going to deep soak it, but I do want to definitely thoroughly saturate this root zone. So I'm just putting my hose on shower setting, making sure I really wet down this mulch. By getting this really nice and saturated, this will start inviting the soil life to come in, the microbes, bugs, and also keep this plant cooler up near the surface here. Again, that water is hitting the root zone. It's running off to the side. That side water is not going to do anything for the plant right now because the roots aren't there, but in time, those roots are going to start traveling out there. And this helps retain the water so it doesn't run off into another section and stays with the plant. So let's just talk through irrigation real quick. Even though we gave this an initial watering, this of course is going to need consistent watering to grow. This is a young plant with a small root ball. You know, we're only talking about a foot. So what I've done here is I put in a fully adjustable spray head here. This is a mini bubbler. At its full capacity, it can drop 23 gallons per hour and hit a 6.5 foot area all the way around. We don't need all that, so I got that partially closed. You will notice that it's very near the trunk, and that's because I want this water to hit the root zone right now. This plant doesn't have roots going out, you know, to other areas. It needs that root ball moist at all times. I'm not concerned about the spray hitting the trunk, even though this is citrus, because it is so hot here. We are in triple digits. Any water that hits the trunk is going to dry up almost immediately, so it's not a concern for right now. As this tree gets older, I can simply take that spray head and move it out. You know, move it out to the side, and then put another one on this side, and then the trunk will not get wet. Really, you only have to be concerned about citrus getting wet in winter. You know, try to avoid that because the trunk will stay wet. I have this going 4 times a day, and the emitter is running 4 minutes each time that it goes. So I think it's like 10 a.m., 12 p.m., 2 p.m., and 4 p.m. are when this runs. So basically taking the 5 gallons of total volume and dividing them into those 4 sessions so that this plant is able to drink incrementally as it needs it, as it sweats out water during the day. That's how I like to water all my plants in summertime, is frequent but low volume. I find they do much better this way. Yes, there are those that will do a slow, deep irrigation, and that may be fine for citrus once it's mature. This plant is not mature, so slow and deep just does not make sense right now. It does not make sense for the first year of any plant, in my opinion. You want frequent irrigation when a tree is young. Once established, once the roots are in the ground, then you could potentially back off and do more volume at a time. Again, I'm not a big fan of deep watering. Certainly you can do that and be successful with it. I just find it wasteful, and the plant doesn't really utilize that water. So I tend to only like to give the plant what it needs. It is moist to the first foot to 2, where the actual feeder roots are. I don't want to go beyond that. I'm not trying to soak 4 feet in the ground. I might need to adjust this a little bit more. If we hit, 115 level, I might need to up this to 5 times a day, or, go from 4 minutes to 5 minutes each session. I'll just have to play with it and see how this plant does. But to start this out, here we're in the low 100s, that's where it will be. So on location, we are looking at the south here. So this does get sun pretty much all day long. It is 12:30 right now, 12:30 p.m. It's in full sun. This will finally get some relief from the sun around 3:30, where the sun, will come up over, and then this bamboo is providing some relief from that in the late afternoon. You don't need to provide citrus afternoon shade, because as long as you keep the plant hydrated, well mulched, it should do fine in the sun. And we've taken the measures to protect the young bark of the trunk by wrapping it. Pick this spot in particular because I have 2 other citrus right in the row here. Just helps with my watering timings. Well, these aren't all the same age. They're all evergreen, so it just kind of helps with, again, grouping like plants when thinking about irrigation, especially during the winter time. So the steps that I took you through in this video really would apply to any plant that I would put into the ground, not just citrus. Just want to show you an example of how successful mound style planting is. This is my avocado, my bacon avocado that's been in the ground for less than a year. And you can see it's just flush of new growth. Looks fantastic. Doing extremely well. And I have to credit the mound style for that, because I have another avocado in ground that does not look like this, that's also grafted. So to assume the mound is doing something for it, and if I could redo everything in the yard, I would definitely go with the mound style. That's how I'll be planting everything that goes into the ground here that's new, is on a mound style. I just think that it really helps with the roots to establish, given the soil construction in my yard, which is mostly clay. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you do have questions, please post them below. If you like this video, please give me the thumbs up. I encourage you to share it and subscribe if you haven't. Thanks for watching, and happy gardening.